Okay. Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On here at allpointstv.com. I also want to thank Mr. Paul Herring over there at 92.1. And Mr. Herring, I just want to commend you for the job that you're doing. It's very difficult for us to be out here with some of the we have a lot of target people are targeting those of us who are in this liberal cesspool, and we are not fitting in. We're not one piece of the puzzle. We're not one piece of the puzzle that fits in with all the other pieces. We're kind of like standing on the outside of the puzzle, and so it's kind of easy to target us because we're such a, I don't say unique, but we are certainly not part of the total package here. And so we don't go along to get along. And in this town, you really have to watch your back. But we're still here, and we are thankful for all of you out there, and just want you to stay tuned in. We picked up a few viewers last week from Facebook. I want to thank you, Facebook, for joining us. And we're going to continue to grow our base, as small as it is right now, but we're here for the long run. And we're not going anywhere until we get the job done. And I want to thank all of the ones who are staying tuned to what we do on Facebook as far as the column that I write. I write a column each week on Facebook. Check that out. I think I'm writing the longest columns on that network. And I want to say that so far, I don't know if it's because I'm operating under the radar or not, but I want to thank Facebook for not censoring me at this point, because they have not thrown me off that net. So a lot of things happen there. I mean, it's not all negative now. I'm not saying that everything that's going on is a partial attack against what we're doing here, but we are here for the long run regardless. And I just want to say to those who are supportive of what we're doing here that we definitely appreciate you and we need your support. Well, we're the only ones that's not asking for a dollar amount. We just want you're glad that you're with us and that you would spend some of your time with us in terms of knowing you can do other things. I want to say a few things about these books that I brought last week. I was telling you about some of the books I was going to start to read, and I'm in the middle of 3 books. I don't like to necessarily be reading multiple books at the same time, but I was so interested in these books that are ordered 2 weeks ago that I wanted to just kind of start them to see what each of the authors was talking about, because I could use all of that right now in the current things that are happening in the society and what we're commenting on both in our articles and also on the net here. And I thought it'd be interesting for me to just go and start reading these books, even though I won't be able to finish one. Given this, I'm slowing down by attacking 3 books at the same time. So going right through a book is not what that lends itself to. But I'm in the middle of this book called A Conspiracy So Immense, and the subtitle of it is The World of Joe McCarthy. It's written by David Olchinski, and this is a very good book. And I'm really interested in how it ends. It's just interesting how McCarthy had uncovered something that was, I know he was a pariah at the time, but he uncovered something that we are now seeing through what we call the deep state. And it wasn't called that then, but that's what it amounts to. And McCarthy was onto something about what was going on inside the government. Some other actors that are behind the scenes. That's not very different from this book by David Horowitz and Richard Poe. I'm in the last chapter of this book. It's called The Shadow Party. The Shadow Party. The subtitle: How George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and 6 radicals seize control of the Democratic Party. And boy, do we see evidence of that by what they're doing with this whole impeachment scenario, where they're not just attacking Donald Trump. That's the front person that is the target of those attacks. But really, when you look at the more expansive aspects to it, the American people are the ones under attack in this country, and they're attacking the very vestiges of the sovereignty of this nation. The country is under attack. And that's why that the force, now they're out of the woodwork and now out in the public, they now have come out of the landscape, no longer operating just in the background. We can see them now because they're now operating in the forefront. And now that they're out there, we can more effectively deal with them and cut them off at the pass, so to speak. But they've got to be defeated. And the first step in doing that, quite frankly, is to resist what they're doing now in impeachment. That's why I was very glad, by the way, that Donald Trump, John and I were just discussing this before we came on the air. John's position is that he should go there, his lawyers and that should go there and put them on the defense. And that's an argument to be made about that. That you can use it's like using judo. You use their own tactics against them, and you use their strength and turn it against them so it becomes a weakness. And that is certainly one way of handling it. My own view is that I think it's really great for Donald Trump to have done it a different way, and that is Donald Trump has refused to engage the impeachment process. And I think that's good, because we have to understand something else too, and that is the constitutional mandates are in place. The Constitution, as you know, has in the first 3 articles of the Constitution, it divides the powers. The framers wanted to divide the powers up so it would not be concentrated in one of the 3 branches. They had to fix the Articles of Confederation, but they did not want to make the federal government so strong and powerful that the power they tried to neutralize in the Articles, by strengthening the federal government, they had to find another way to make the government accountable. And that can only happen when the concentration of power is, in fact, either not allowed or is disaggregated. And so in their disaggregation, they decided that what they would do here is they would place the powers of the federal government in 3 different corridors of the Constitution. Article 1 would be the article that sets up the legislative branch of government, and they would be the lawmaking part of the government. And then you would have the enforcement of the laws that are being passed by the legislative bodies, so that would be the executive branch, which is set up in Article 2. And then Article 3 would be the arbiter of the other 2 branches, the one that would, in fact, interpret whether or not what they, first of all, are passing meets the smell test based upon the mandates in the Constitution, and then whether or not the enforcement of that is consistent with the Constitution. And that would be the court. In the 3rd article of the Constitution, their mandate is to, in fact, be the interpreter of the law. And so this check and balance system we always talk about, which would be the fact that the powers are dispersed and then each one can check on the others. Each one has responsibility, by the way, of carrying out parts of the check and balance. The executive branch could be the branch that, just like what Andrew Jackson said, that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall, who was Chief Justice from 1801 to 1835, he said in the Chisholm versus Georgia case in 1832, he said the Supreme Court, meaning John Marshall, has made its decision. Now let Marshall enforce it. And the court doesn't have any enforcement power. That's in the domain of the presidency. And so he said, let Marshall enforce it. Because he was saying he's speaking outside of the Constitution. And we have to understand something that's going on right now. That the reason why you have the court getting involved in certain decisions that are made when the president's involved in it. The reason why the court gets into it and then the president abides by the court decisions is because that's 2/3 of the federal government, and 2/3 trumps, no pun intended, but 2/3 trumps 1/3. And so if the legislative body is saying one thing and then the court sides with the legislative body, that's 2/3 of the federal government. And their voice, therefore, collectively, as one voice, trumps the voice of the president, which is a single voice in the executive branch. But the idea that the framers had is a significantly important idea, and we have to abide by what they did because they were figuring this. What I'm impressed with is how they figured this out so that there's no ambiguity in the Constitution. This is a point I was making when I was in Arizona. I was at the Trump headquarters there, and I really just really was energized by being there. The person I visited in Arizona took me by that headquarters. I was really energized because there were some people that had really understood the Constitution, and we were having a very lively conversation. And I was very impressed because you don't find too many people, including these scholars, that really understand. I don't think the scholars understand the Constitution. I mean, they say they are the constitutional scholars, and I'm beginning to really have some doubts about that. And I'm going to be watching them Wednesday. They're supposed to be having as this other joker now picks up the banner. It's a marathon race. So after Adam Schiff had done his part, it's been handed off now to Nadler, and now he's going to pick it up in the House Judiciary Committee, and they're going to continue this marathon of trying to bring about the impeachment of this president. And the reason why they continue to do that, because they could have started out in the House Judiciary Committee, because the other ones have to recommend the impeachment to the whole House, and then from there, if they voted by majority vote, is then referred to the Senate for trial. But the reason why they're running this marathon is because they have not yet convinced the American people that they have a case here and that this is not a matter of partisan politics. And that's why they are continuing this charade and run this scam without having taken an impeachment vote. And do not get confused here. There's been no impeachment vote that's taken, and therefore there cannot be an impeachment inquiry because there's no vote that's on the record of saying that there's impeachment in place. That's why I'm saying here that the president has made the right decision and not to join in a charade, because we have to understand the framers put in place a separation of powers. And you cannot allow a committee to act as if it's 1/3 of the federal government, because that undermines the Constitution's separation of the powers in the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And so although President Trump has not made this claim of that's what he's doing, the effect of it is that he is not allowing this undermining of the vestiges of the Constitution to go on by the illegality that's in place here by these two committees. These people are criminals.
See, I think if I were Trump and I had the resources I had personally, available to me, I could add, billions of dollars. I would employ around the clock investigators. I would bring charges. I'd bring counter charges against all these people. I would do that. So it just goes to show either he doesn't want to risk the money, which I don't think is the case, or he's got more of a sense of decorum or propriety that he's been given credit for. Because I'd be going back and finding their skeletons in their closet. Especially Schiff. There's something about Schiff, and I kind of mentioned, but I can't back that up right now. I can't find it. But there's something about Schiff on there that I think he's a scumbag. Yeah. And I'd like to prove that. But
John is a fighter, and
I'd bury these guys in their own crap. Because Biden's been in office, all these people have been in office for years. You can't tell me anybody who's been in political office for more than 2 years doesn't have some dirt to dig up.
Yeah, we on the same page there. There's nowhere in the world, I believe, that there's any clean hands in our government. They all, that's why incumbents is a problem here. They all have their hands in the cookie jar. That's how it operates. Washington is a graft center.
But besides, look at this though.
That's how it operates.
You run for office. Like I got a friend that you know, and we'll mention maybe to introduce her later sometime. But she's running for office. On the way up, she doesn't have much money. She's going to try to probably have people give you money. They're going to expect something in return for it. The more the money, the more they want from you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, the systems are basically setting up our people, and I'll say this, they're setting them up for failure and for corruption from the onset, the way we run our elections. Yeah.
Yeah, John, you're making a great point. We don't disagree on the substance. We have different ways of attacking the problem. We both identify and understand the problem. And our discussion before we went on the air was more about process than it was anything else. In terms of having to root these people out, we are definitely in 100% in sync with each other, and our viewpoint is congruent. We have congruence in our viewpoints about the cesspool that Washington is. In fact, I would say this, and I did say this, I think, to some extent in my post today on Facebook, and that is that the Washington is Washington is the most corrupt capital in the world, and the reason why that's true is because Washington is the most prominent capital in the world. And by having such prominence, it means that the politicians in the most powerful country in the world is the influences of the politics in every government in the world. There's an influence that America has. Therefore, given its prominence, it is important then that there be an attempt that what the other governments are doing is that they have to influence the center because they have such an influence upon the politics that they are of their nation and also around the world. So that it's incumbent upon them to try to influence the center of that power. And I would say this also. That's why it's so ridiculous to be doing an investigation on the Russians influencing. The Russians influenced our election. They didn't vote in it. And this idea of them attempting to influence it, why would anyone be surprised by that? You have to understand the fact that Washington is not just the center of it's not just the capital of the United States. In a larger sense, and I'm not talking about being sovereignty in those places, but in a larger sense, it's the capital of the world because of its prominence, because of the fact that its monetary system is the system on which the world is based. You know, the monetary system is based on the dollar. As long as that's the case, then the influence of the world is there in the capital of this country. And so the countries are trying to influence that because the influence that it has. It's like one hand washes the other. But do not get confused here in thinking that means that the influence is a cause of the outcome. Obviously they're trying to influence it. And in fact, there's another point to be made here, is that if there is an investigation that is legitimate about the influence, it will really be Washington investigating itself. Because the influence is on that side. The question is, what's the effective influence on this side? In other words, if they are paying for influence, then the party that should be investigated, because nobody should be surprised about the influence, the attempted influence, the investigation should be on the side of the receivers of that influence. Such as, let me say this, such as investigating Biden, which they're not doing. And that's why it's a scam. This investigation of Trump, I mean, even after you have President Zelensky of Ukraine reiterated his point today, said, according to the news today, that there was no quid pro quo. Now, if the person that you're saying they were trying to influence by quid pro quo says there was no pressure and no quid pro quo, then what are they investigating? They're not investigating anything. What they're trying to do is get cover for the intentionality that's already in place, because they intend to impeach this president because they don't have any choice. And when you listen to those candidates on the other side over there, one of my friends sent me a video of Biden today, and what he wrote in my message board in that part of the Facebook. He said, "What is Biden talking about?" So I listened to the tape. This tape was totally incoherent. I mean, something is going on with Biden mentally. I mean, it's like it's past incoherence. What he was talking about was disjointed and disconnected from one part of his discussion to another part. Nothing was it's past being incoherent because nothing was connected. And it was like a third grade child that was talking. Something is going on there mentally, and if he's a standard bearer for the Democratic Party, they got a problem. But really, they don't have anybody over there, and that's why people continue to jump into it, because they see what I see. I mean, do you hear what I hear? And do you see what I see? And what I see is a bunch of people on the other side, none of whom can challenge a legitimate challenge to unseat this president in the election in 2020. They're not there. And that explains Bloomberg, and that explains Deval Patrick, who jumped in. By the way, he jumped in and jumped out because we went to Morehouse College, standing in the shadows of Martin Luther King, I guess, because that's the college that Martin Luther King graduated, did his understudy work. Going to stand in the shadows of Martin Luther King and go down there to announce his candidacy, and he pulled all of 2 students. And so then he bounced in there and he got bounced out after that travesty occurred, because after that was known publicly, nobody's going to fund that. And so his campaign dried up almost overnight. But why did he jump in the first place? He jumped in there because he saw the field is already out there. And Elizabeth Warren, people have found her out. She was at 28%. She's now down to 14%. And she is definitely not going to be the nominee. If she's a nominee, Wall Street has already said, by the way, that if she's a nominee, they're not going to throw any money into the Democratic Party's campaign. I mean, and plus she's a flake anyway. You can go and just look at how she's waving all the time and hands all out of control. I mean, there's something going on there too. And so they don't have, I mean, who's going to be the standard bearer? That remains to be seen. We know some people that's not going to be, and I don't see how, and I'm not homophobic, and I don't care who people are with, and who you date, who you fall in love with. That's your own private affairs. That's not the point. But I can't see Pete Buttigieg leading this country. I can't see that, because it will be so unlike what we have in the world. It'd be so different. And then look at the prominence of the nation, and then looking at the fact that it's different from all the other nations, 192 to 195 nations, is different from any other nation on the planet. That would be an issue. And I just cannot see it for the international aspect, and I don't even see it as far as it being such a dissimilarity in how the country itself functions. I mean, I think, I would say, I don't even think it would work to have a Muslim over this country. You know, you can say what you want to, but a country operates by some congruency. And although we are, and I heard Prager talk about this last week, that we are a secular nation with religious underpinnings. And those underpinnings he's talking about are not underpinnings that come from the Quran, and they don't come from the Bhagavad Gita either. The text that it comes from, the foundational text, comes out of the Judeo-Christian background. So that's you got to have some congruency, something that kind of glues the nation together, something that concretizes the philosophical tenets of the country. And so this placement of people that's unlike that which is the glue of the nation is a problem for the nation. And so that's something I just can't see. And they don't have it over there. And so it's very hard to see who the standard bearer is going to be, but right now they've not been identified. Okay, John just told me we're taking a break with WFOV, and we want you to come back always after your break is over, and we'll see you in 4 minutes. We know your break is 4 minutes long, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. Okay, with that being said, we will continue what we're doing here. But there's a problem here, and they recognize that they have a problem, and that's why Bloomberg is in there. Don't know how long he's going to stay in there. Although he certainly has the finance to run a campaign, even if he doesn't get support otherwise. He does have the finances to take it down the road. But whether or not it resonates, that's another matter. And it's not just about finance, as he's finding out by his numbers, because he does not have. I think he's now at 3%. And if they see, a lot of people thought, like Mark Cuban, a lot of people thought that it's just a matter of the money, and they did not take into consideration that Donald Trump is a billionaire several times over, but there's something that Donald Trump has in addition to his money that is something that you cannot place a dollar figure on. And some of you saw that, by the way, when Donald Trump was doing that program on NBC, what was it called, the Enterprise? Forget the name of it, but
mean his show?
Yeah, what was it?
The Apprentice.
The Apprentice. That's right. The Apprentice. Donald Trump did that program for 15 years, and that program was a hit. I mean, the format is not really all that powerful, but because of the personality that Donald Trump has and the charisma that he brought to the program, that program lasted and had great ratings, made a lot of money at the NBC. They forgot that, of course, now that he's our president, they're just as much against him as CNN is. But he made a lot of money for that network, and they begged him to continue doing what he was doing. But when they turned it over to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a great physical presence on the screen, big screen, but there's a different characteristic that's required for the kind of program that The Apprentice was, and he did not have that, and that program folded. And that's what I'm talking about as far as the president's concerned. It's not just about the dollar figure. Bloomberg certainly has the money. He has more money than Donald Trump. But what he's finding out is that with all his money, his resonance in the Democratic Party is not that great. And if they play that tape that I saw on my wall on Facebook, sent to me by my friend, if they play that tape, if Joe Biden is a nominee for the Democratic Party, that campaign is over. Because it is very clear that something is wrong. There are some psychomotor functions that are not firing. Some synapses are not firing in Biden's head.
Well, he is a Democrat, so.
And he's a Democrat, so we know that's true. John said, well, he's a Democrat. Yeah, so that's also a factor. but there's a real problem here. And we have to be aware of what that means. Okay, I see that W4V is back. And we always try to hold it down until you get back. So we're back. We're glad you're back after 4 minutes. And I want to thank you for coming back. But they don't have anybody over there, folks. They're still looking for the standard bearer. And I don't think it's, I'm going to say I know. I know it's not going to be Elizabeth Warren. And I know it's not going to be Buttigieg. So the only question is, and this is a real big question. This is like a tall building question mark. Who is going to be the nominee? And it's out of that vacuum, that political vacuum, that they have to go forward with the impeachment, because there's no reason to be impeaching this president based on any things they're claiming. In fact, if you watch the 3 days of hearing that they had under Adam Schiff, that was a national embarrassment for Adam Schiff. But because every one of Schiff's witnesses, every last one of them was asked, do you have any information here? This is what the Republicans were asking, that would tie the president to any bribery? No. Do you have any information that would show if there was any collusion? Did the president say anything to you about quid pro quo? Ask some of them, were you in on the conversation with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine? And that answer to that question was no, and yet that was the basis and that is the basis right now of what they're trying to impeach the president on. They're saying there was a quid pro quo where they were using money that was allocated by the House and voted upon by the Senate and then approved by the president. And here you have this bill being passed, and the president is holding it up, waving in front of the officials in Ukraine, saying, if you don't do our bidding, then we're not going to give you the money allocated by the government. And here's the president holding it up. That would be, and they're saying here, an impeachable offense, although they're not concerned about it having taken place when Biden was vice president. And there's no doubt about Biden having done that, because on tape discussing it and actually bragging about it. I mean, it's just so, it's amazing that they're going forward with it, because that issue was crushed by the hearing that Adam Schiff had. You would have thought if the man had any if he had an ounce of integrity, after that hearing was over, after each one came there and embarrassed Adam Schiff, because it was saying something in public they didn't say in private. In fact, one of them, Sondland was his name, the ambassador. Really, he double-crossed Schiff, because Schiff said that you said X, Y, and Z, talking about the private hearing, you said something different, and now you are testifying and saying something that's in fact contradictory to that, because now he's in public, and if he says that the president did this in public, that can be contravened by whether or not he had any conversations along that line with the president. And so his testimony was different. So you thought then, given that fact, just that fact alone, that Schiff would have said, if he had any integrity, he would have said, okay, folks, we can go home now, because the charges that we were talking about voting in articles of impeachment, we now know that can not be based upon any evidence, but that's not what they did. What they're doing is the same thing that they did in 1972. Nixon was reelected in 1972 for a second term, but the media, I'm talking here about the fake news, which wasn't called fake news at that time, but it was fake news because they're doing the same thing then they're doing now. The fake news ran this narrative that Richard Nixon had engineered the break-in. He was involved in the cover-up, but the engineering of it was the CIA. And that's clear based upon my own research, which I didn't have any validation of it for a long time until I read this book. It wasn't that there was not validation out there. I had read in 1978, I think it was, Haldeman's book called The Ends of Power. And from that book, I pieced together some of the parts of the puzzle from what he wrote, and I had concluded that there was something in the background here that had caused that, but particularly when the outcome of the election was known, because in 1972, Richard Nixon won every state except one and carried all the electoral votes except 18. Only 17 electoral votes went to George McGovern, one went to the independent, and then Richard Nixon got 520. And therefore, given the fact that polling had indicated that would be the outcome, because George McGovern never got out of the 30s as far as the support he had among the general population, and there was no reason for anybody to be worried about what he was doing inside of the DNC, because that was of no consequence. There was just no way Nixon was going to lose was going to lose re-election. And so I knew something was in back of it based upon having read Haldeman's book, but I also knew something was in back of it by the fact that the outcome of the election didn't make any sense in terms of why you would have a break-in and there's no threat that the opposing party poses to the re-election of the president. So now I have to look at CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President, because that's where the break-in had occurred. Now I'm interested, after reading Haldeman's book, I'm now interested in who is on that committee, who makes up CREEP. And when I saw the same ones, E.L. Hunt, and some of the same ones that were in Dealey Plaza, it did more than tickle my ears. It raised my eyebrows, raised the hair on the top of my head, the little hair that I have left. And I knew then that this was a setup. But I couldn't prove anything, so I kind of kept a lot of it on the wraps, but I knew then that there was something in back of it. Just like I knew that something was in back of the president being assassinated. I knew that. I knew there was more to it than was being told to the American people by the Warren Commission. In fact, I knew the Warren Commission was a cover-up. That was very clear. No one person, I don't care how good they are, could have done that. Could have pulled that off in Dealey Plaza. That is impossible. What happened in Dealey Plaza could be done by a single person firing, and firing at the wrong time. I mean, I've been arguing this on Facebook also, and I will tell you this, all the ones on Facebook that's been getting on my posts trying to argue with me about that, I'll tell you this, and I have been saying this to this one person that reads my posts and challenges anything that I put on there. I don't know why he does it, but I have to tell him the truth. You're over your head. You're totally over your head in terms of that case, because I studied that case for 40 years, and I'm still studying it. But I do think I have the names, and Oswald is not one of them. So you can so you can argue all you want to. We're not having a debate. There's nothing to debate. Not if you tell me what you've been telling me on that post. So I knew. See, I knew that was a cover up, and I knew something was going on in Watergate because after I read about the electoral vote, and that's how we elect presidents in this country. The Electoral College elects presidents, the states elect presidents in this country, and they always have, and I hope that never changes because we are endangered by having democracy. The framers tried to avoid it because they understood the dangers that it represents. You have a single majority deciding the fate of the nation. That's a problem. And you want if you're gonna get it right, and you don't want to oppress a faction that's a majority, but you do not want them to have untoward influence over how the country is run because majorities can be very dangerous and oftentimes have been dangerous because you can make the decision based upon numbers and the voice that is not heard, that because it doesn't have the numbers can be suppressed because it is a minority voice, and the majoritarian voice can come in and rule the roost and take their liberties from them just by being in the majority. So the framers set the Electoral College up to address that problem. And when you understand the system, you understand how brilliant it is. And I'll say this too. I just got the reading, among my other readings this past week, these books, The Shadow Party, A Conspiracy So Immense, The World of Joe McCarthy, and the Destructive Generation. Second thoughts about the Sixers, which I have a lot of second thoughts about it as well, because I made a lot of mistakes about the Sixers. But in addition to that, reading these books here, I also read a paper from a professor at Hillsdale College, one of the most respectable colleges in the United States. It's not Harvard. Not when you got Lawrence Tribe over there. And Lawrence Tribe, the law professor, I don't even know. I don't know how to say this on the air, but I want him to know I don't have any respect. I don't have any respect for him. Not that it makes any difference to him, of course, but I don't respect this man because I think. But I'm not so sure that he knows better than what he's saying. But what he's saying is ridiculous. In fact, I'll be honest with you. I don't know of a single scholar. That's why I was saying earlier. I'm looking forward to Wednesday when they have when Schiff passed the mantle off to Nadler, and the House Intelligence Committee hands off the impeachment hearing. They call it impeachment hearing. There's no impeachment hearing because we've not had an impeachment vote. But the inquiry of the committee is going to be handed off to Nadler's committee. Nadler has the House Judiciary Committee, and Adam Schiff had the House Intelligence Committee. Figure that one out, House Intelligence Committee, and Adam Schiff is, in fact, the chairman of it. They don't even go together. It's something ironic. That's the irony that's the mother of all ironies. But when they restart and try to rekindle the energy around the impeachment, they're going to bring the scholars in, and the scholars are supposedly going to give them cover to make the claim that they ought to go forward with impeachment. So they say that 3 of them are going to make the constitutional claim that these violations are so egregious. First of all, they're not even proven any violations, but they're so egregious that they mandate impeachment. And they have one to show that there's they're not ganging up on the president. So they have one person tell me that is going to make the case that there is not an impeachable offense. And you know something? Although they, according to the reports, are on different sides of the issue, both sides are wrong. And you might say, well, how can that be? Three allegedly are going to say that what the president has done rises up to an impeachable offense. And you're saying the one that is going to say the other thing, which is the other side, is that he has not committed claims that are in violation. There are no claims that can be made in which he is in fact in violation of the Constitution. And how can you say then that those that would say that he has created impeachable offenses, and now you're saying the ones that have the opposite view that he has not created impeachable offenses, they're wrong also? How can both of those two things, which seem to be in contradiction to each other, this claim being made and then the claim not being made, how can both of them be wrong? They're both wrong because there's no such thing as an impeachable offense. And I want Dershowitz to go back to the two Federalist Papers, both of them written by Alexander Hamilton. He quotes them all the time. He didn't quote both of them. He quotes 65. He doesn't quote 66. But he quotes 65, and he claims to understand it. I'm here to tell him he doesn't understand it. Because if he did, he would not be making these outrageous comments on the air. And these comments are outrageous. And I can hardly wait until Wednesday, because I want to see how widespread this lack of constitutional grounding among the scholars. These people are teaching at the university level. They are turning out tomorrow's leaders. I want to see how widespread this problem is. I know that it's pretty bad because Harvard, the dean of the colleges in this country, Lawrence Tribe, is the law professor at Harvard University, and he's a dingbat. Based on what he's saying. And I dare any of them to say that to me. They better not say it, or it's going to be embarrassing. They're not going to say it. And I'm on Facebook. In terms of, I'm gonna put this up on Facebook, and I want them to come down from the citadels of the scholarly citadel of power, come down from the mountaintop down to where I am, and challenge it where I am. I dare them to do it. They're not gonna do it. You better not do it. Because they don't know what they're talking about, and I really think, quite frankly, that this is a scholastic issue. This is a question about literacy, because you cannot read Federalist Paper 65. You cannot read that Federalist Paper written by Alexander Hamilton and then conclude that there's any such thing as an impeachable offense. Why? Because in Federalist Paper 65, Hamilton is talking about the political aspects of the impeachment process. And throughout that document, he continues to talk about how it is political. That's why you have to have the check and balance system inside of the Congress. See, they don't even understand that after you have the impeachment in the House, to guard against the political aspect of the impeachment, you have it going to the Senate for the trial. And because it is in a political body, I think you would admit that the members of the legislative branch of government are all elected members. So they're all politicians. You have to guard against that. Because politicians are a factional group. This party and that party. So a partisan in this group and a partisan in another group. And if you have a person on trial who is identified with any of the two groups, the partisanship comes in. It's a political process. And that's why the Constitution does not lay out. You listen carefully, Dershowitz. That's why it doesn't say anything about impeachment offenses in the Constitution, because impeachment is found in Article 1. You dumb idiots. You can't say, folks, I have to tell you something. You cannot say what these people are saying out in public and be a scholar. You cannot do it. That is impossible. You can't be a scholar and say that you have to have treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. And in fact, that's not even true based upon what they are now doing. They're trying to impeach the president for something he has not done. So is that bribery, treason, or other high crimes and misdemeanors? They accuse him of a crime. And the president said, and not joining in that, he said, and they know that it's a scam. He says it's a scam and they know it, and they do know it. And as Dershowitz was talking about, you got to have yeah, this is a comedy show. And I'm not into too much comedy when it comes to that document, because I take that very seriously. Because I know why those framers were in that room. They were trying to iron out contradictions in the document so that there will be no contradictions in the document. And that's why that document is seamless. It took them almost 3 months to get it right. And I can see the arguments in that room. I can see what they're doing in that room by what the final product is. See, here's what they do. They say George Mason took this point of view. Of course, George Mason never signed, he was not a signatory to the Constitution, although I think George Mason had more to do with the Constitution than James Madison. But he never signed it because he didn't agree, he did not, in the end, agree with some of the tenets of it. But it had a lot to do with what they came up with. But there were some vestiges of it that he did not think he could put his name to it, because he was an honorable man. But when they start quoting, this person said this and this person said that, you can get tripped up by looking at it that way. The question is, what was the totality of the efforts? And the final product is seamless. That's why I was saying in Arizona, as I was having a discussion with all these persons down there with scholars, I was amazed by it, quite frankly, because I had never seen that many persons in the room that were that serious about the Constitution, and they are serious down there. And if you want to see somebody clinging to their guns and their religion, that thing that Obama was accusing them of, that's what we ought to be doing. But I saw that in real time with my own eyes. That's what I went to the headquarters in Kingman, and that's what I saw. But I was telling them as they were discussing this, and they were one guy said he wanted to see if Donald Trump is when Donald Trump leaves office, which we think it's going to be another 5 years, because I don't see anybody out there that's going to be able to defeat Donald Trump. And they're not going to be able to make a case against him in terms of impeachment either, because the Republican Party is not going to go along with it. So we're talking about 5 more years. But they were saying after 5 years, he said, after 5 years, after the president is out of office, I'd like to see Ted Cruz run. And I was saying that Ted Cruz is not eligible to run, because Ted Cruz is not a natural born citizen of the United States. And so then the discussion comes into what the Constitution requires there too. But the framers figure this out as well. And this idea that the Constitution does not spell out, which all the scholars are saying this now, and all scholars are saying they're wrong. They're saying the Constitution does not spell out what it means by natural born citizen. These people are illiterate. It does spell it out, but it does not spell it out by saying it is this. Here's another problem. You see, they are linear thinkers, and you can see that in their classes when they teach. They have their notes, and it goes down. Okay, thanks, John. They go down this point, connect to that point, this point. And it's like, that's how they see that's how they think in linear channels. But when you have to bring things in and it's not all itemized because it's not listed as such, they think the Constitution, because there's no itemization, does not in fact state what a natural born citizen is, and it does. Go read Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, and we'll pick it up there next week when we'll pick it up at that point. Mr. President, I'm going to commend you for not participating in this charade, and you are protecting the separation of power by not doing so. Okay, I got to get out of here. Want to see you next week, of course, at the same time, same station. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.